Recording in progress.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our SCM Fire Chats. We're very happy and honored to have today Rosemary Tjombonde all the way from Namibia this morning to speak to us or to have a conversation as we engage about SCM positioning and branding. I am, of course, with my partner, Phumzile Njogo, who will introduce herself shortly. Rosemary Tjombonde is a procurement specialist, but we don't like to take, the spot or the hot where it is. So she will, introduce herself properly before we go on. So, Rosemary.
Yes, morning, everyone. Morning, Phumzile and Sibogile, and all the listeners online. My name is Rosemary Tjombonde-Kakuuai. I'm currently heading a procurement department at one of the universities in Namibia. However, I disclaim I'm here in my own personal capacity, not in relation to my employer, just to put it out there. I'm a procurement consultant, a procurement professional by profession. I've almost been in procurement now for almost 10 years or so. I've worked in the various industries. I work in the financial sectors and also in now currently I'm in the higher education sector. I eat, breathe, and talk procurement in general and supply chain is something that I have a very passion for, to such an extent that I also do consultants on the side. What do they say? They call it the side hustle. So yeah, that's how I actually met up with Phumzile. I think we met online on LinkedIn. Yeah, and then we just had a chat or two about the whole procurement, supply chain, and then she told me about the fire chat conversation, and then she asked me to, if I can be a speaker on one of the webinar. And yeah, to cut a long story short, yeah, we're here now. Yeah, basically, so that's me in short.
Thank you, Rosemary. My partner in crime, Phumzile, can you just quickly introduce yourself? Yeah.
Imagine in crime. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for another installment of our Supply Chain Fire Chat. My name is Phumzile Njogo. For those who are new to me, I'm the co-founder of the NS Business School. We're so happy to have Rosemary today. I think in the chats we've been having, is that, when we are talking supply chain management, people are always thinking it's just about tenderings, but there's so much happening in the space, in supply chain management space, and we are still a supply chain management professional saying e-procurement and supply chain management is the backbone of the economies. Okay, not just companies. So as soon as people start understanding that, the better. And that's what we're trying really to do with these fire chats, is to bring or to surface the full spectrum of what supply chain management is about. Because I believe that the more people understand what supply chain management is about, it is better for them in their spaces as professionals or business owners to then actually start understanding, okay, what is the impact of the supply chain in my business? What is this impact? What is the value chain? And how does it actually affect my operations? How does it actually affect my financials, my profits? Because bottom line is that everything then leads down to the bottom line. So thank you so much, Rosemary, for joining us. Last week in our entrepreneurial corner, we talked about branding and positioning from the view or through the lens of a business owner or an entrepreneur. So now we're trying to juxtapose that to say what is branding and supply chain from or through the lens of a supply chain management professional. But we see these two always conjoining, because supply chain management always goes back and links back to the entrepreneurial space. And that's why we are always running the entrepreneurial space, and we are running the procurement and supply chain fire chats one week in and 1 week out. So I'm hoping people are starting to see the congruency or the alignment that we're trying to create there. So without further ado, I'll hand it back over to Sibongile and let's get into it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pumzile. So today is one of the interesting. I know that people are always listening. When we do these fire chats, we talk technical. But now today we talk about another aspect of facet of supply chain, because a supply chain management professional, it requires, I think, a whole lot. Yes, in the other professions it's the same, but we often always overlook these other skills that are required from a supply chain professional as well, for them to be able to execute. We know this space, we know what it means to be in this particular space, and we know what it means to be a supply chain professional, what it requires. We have those qualities, we talk about the technical, we talk about the capabilities, but we often miss, I think, some of the other skills and the soft skills and what it means when you brand, as a professional. What does it mean? Because, as we were posting, as we were talking to people about this, we were like, oh, branding for supply chain, what do you mean by that? Interestingly, or I'm interested to find out, what do you mean? Because we look at supply chain, as Pumzile says, people think you're just doing tendering or you are just a support that is in the back office. But as Pumzile says, this is the space that deals with the economy of the country, that deals with the competitiveness of the organizations. I can always go even further to say it contributes to the successes and the failures of the business. So, but what do we mean? Yeah. I think, Rosemary, from your side, I think if you can just tell us more about this branding and positioning within SCM for the SCM professionals.
Yes, thank you very much, Pumzile and Tjombonde. For me, when the topic came up, or the conversation came about positioning and branding, I always go by my personal. There's always something that I say that it's a quote by Jeff Bezos that say that your brand is what people say about you when you are not in the room. Now, in as much as the first thing that I always go back to is when it comes to procurement and or supply chain management, for lack of for us just to be consistent, a lot of people do not understand what is supply chain management. And in more so, like if you go back now to this code, what is it that people says about supply chain management when we are not present? Like Pumzile said, it's more about people always think that we are just there to give tenders. The moment you say I work in procurement, or no, I'm the head of supply chain at the university or wherever, the first thing that comes to people's minds, can you give me a tender? Can I come and register as a supplier? So, which for me, to a certain extent, I believe that as procurement or as supply chain professionals, somewhere, somehow, we have failed to put our brand out there. Because as we all know, that branding is a process where a business actually differentiates itself in the public from one business to the next, where like Apple and Samsung, they are clearly two different brands, and they actually have done a lot of work to differentiate themselves, because an Apple product being it's an Apple product and a Samsung product being a Samsung product. Now, when it comes to SCM, for me, what I got to see is like we have not really put in the work in terms of branding the profession. Because if you look at a profession like SAICA, for example, I think you guys said the South Africa Institute of Chartered Accountancy. I think in Namibia we also have a similar body. When it comes to their branding and when it comes to the profession, for them it's very, very clear. People know that if you are into accountancy, want to be a chartered accountancy, you belong to that profession. And this is our profession, this is what it stands for. On the other side, when it comes now to supply chain, it's very difficult for people to pinpoint, but what exactly is supply chain management? So for me, where it comes back to say that we have not really done such a good job in terms of selling to whether it's now our organization or whether it's now to our peers, that exactly what is supply chain management. So I don't know whether I'm making out in terms of trying to just lay down the foundation of what is branding. And I think, if you guys have any questions just for me, that's what I go to, because for us is to understand or to make the people understand that what is exactly is supply chain management. I think that's where we'll start to build our brand, because in as much as other professions have actually have been professionalized, they have their bodies, they have all that. For us, we do have certain professional bodies in terms of supply chain management. We have the SIPs for procurement, we have SILs for logistics and so forth. But have we really put the brief out there for the public or for the people to understand?
Yeah, I understand. So the issue then becomes in terms of how we differentiate ourselves between, from other professions, or how the other professions have done it. But what I hear you saying is that we have failed perhaps to position supply chain, as a brand. So it looks like, I think, Rosemary and Pumzi, that it's as if we've allowed, I think, the activities rather of what the profession is about, to allow those activities by people perceptions that procurement is tendering, for example. And to your point, to say then people will be like, oh, okay, then if you are a procurement, or you're saying I'm a buyer or I'm in supply chain, then it means you will help me with maybe registering me in your company, or give me tenders if you work for a government, or even within a private sector. But then maybe you have also mentioned that there's SIPs and SILs. So, but how do we, maybe as a supply chain professional, because we're also speaking about a supply chain professional here in terms of the branding. So how do we ensure that, we are actually seen for what we do, or what we believe we do, or for what the professional bodies are saying a supply chain is, or in terms of definition, we do have these bodies that define it, define it for us what it is. But then as a supply chain professional, I come from university, or from, I have my diploma, or I've just changed, whatever that may be. So how do I ensure, or what do I do? What are the steps that I need to take for me to actually ensure this legacy, or brand myself the way it's supposed to be in assisting with, positioning of supply chain?
I always say that when it comes to brand, it's very difficult for you not to position yourself in such a way in that you need to sell yourself to the people in terms of your attitude and your beliefs. I think those are the two cornerstones that actually build a brand. So as a procurement or as a supply chain professional, the one thing that we actually that we need to sell ourselves on is, what value do we bring to organization or to the institution? Mm-hmm. Because I think that's always go back as the question that most organizations always, because I don't know about you guys, but in most organizations, supply chain management we are always put somewhere. I think sometimes in finance, you are actually very lucky if a supply chain management or procurement in an organization actually have a seat at the table and you are recognized for the value that we are bringing. Now, in order for us to put ourselves out there, some of the things that one can do, it's like we need to sell ourselves in terms of what value do we bring to the table. Because currently, as it is, people only understand supply chain management as we are just buying and selling. You buy or you need to procure a service, and then that's it. But we don't go to such an extent where we actually sit with this department or within our institution to say, but if I am saying that we need to issue an RFQ instead of an RFP, it's because of the following. This is actually the value that this method of procurement is going to bring to the organization opposed to the other. We don't sell like what you call a business case. Mm-hmm. For us, we only get instructions, and what we do, instead of actually trying to now sell a value to this department or to this end user, we just run with it. We don't go back to where we we sell an idea to them and say, instead of doing A, B, C, and D, this is actually what you need to do. So the value, for me, the first thing that I always say, it's like the value that we bring as a professional is one thing that we need to, that we don't bring out as much. And then secondly, it also comes when it comes to consistency. Because of either what I would say, it's probably it's a lack of skills or whatever. Most of the time, people always see like supply chain professional as we are inconsistent in our approach. Today we say, well, the one thing, then tomorrow we say another thing. We don't have, and this goes back to within your organization, what policies, what procedures, what tools have you put in place for people to actually take you serious? Those are some of the things we don't have, because then we just go by the finance policies or procedures, but we don't have our own as a supply chain professional within the institution. So I don't know whether that's now talked to what you asked. So for me, it's go back to saying that we need to be consistent with our approach, and we also need to bring what value are we bringing to the organization? Why must the organization take supply chain management serious?
Yeah, I agree. I think, when you're touching on value, to me, that is the critical area where supply chain is struggling with to demonstrate the value add to the operations of the business, to the strategic trajectory in the business, and to actually demonstrate the bottom line effect or the top line effect. We are always, for example, reporting on some savings that we are always, we always report on savings. And for most part, these savings are seen as phantom, because a lot of people cannot see the real impact of these savings on the actual bottom line. People in the business cannot necessarily tangibly recognize the improvement in operations because of supply chain. So I think that value is very important, because if then we are able to establish the value add on the important levers of the business, our battle would be won. But my problem is, how do we get that conversation going? Is it a top to bottom conversation where we are saying, because it links very much to the culture of that particular organization and just to the culture in the ecosystem of what supply chain is currently perceived to be? So are we saying we are leaving the owners on the top echelons within the business to say, you guys need to start defining what this value looks like for supply chain, and can we start talking or singing that hymn so that it drills down vertically so and horizontally so across the business? Or are we saying, no, you as supply chain people, professionals there at the bottom, you need to start doing your work. You need to start getting yourself educated. You need to get the accreditations. You need to do, and position yourself, start, acting like professionals. Only then we will start taking you seriously. What are your views on the where can we start crystallizing and improving that value, because that's what is going to be a bigger portion in creating a very strong brand for supply chain?
Yes, Pumsi, you actually just said something when my next point was going to be. We need to, for me, if we have to wait for a top-bottom approach, we might wait until kingdom come. Because it's like you're saying that executive, they don't see, especially most of the time, because supply chain always reports to a CFO in many organizations. You are part of the finance department and you report to the CFO. So, and because the CFO has a seat at the table, their interest when they are at that seat, it's definitely not supply chain management. their interest is finance because the person is the chief financial officer. But the point that they tend to forget is like, in order for them, them, I'm referring to finance, for them to meet their bottom line, it's that they will need a supply chain person to actually help put, whether through savings and so forth. But then the onus on us now as supply chain, because for me, I will feel it's a conversation that needs to start from bottom up. Why am I saying that is we need to identify what are our strengths as procurement professionals. And like what you are saying is we need to say, what skill do we have? Or how, in terms of accreditation and in terms of our qualification, because that's where it starts. When you're building any brand, you need to understand what are your skills, what are your strengths, what is differentiating you from a finance officer next to you, what strength do you have? And now in procurement, in supply chain, there are certain skills that you will need to know as a professional, that you need to really be well equipped. Skills like supplier relationship management, negotiation, the whole life cycle cost of of a product. All these things that you need to understand, influencing, and also stakeholder management. So, because first, when you have identified what your strengths are and what are the skills that you are having as a procurement professional, it will be very easy for you to take that conversation to the next level. Because now, if you are unsure about the type of skills that you or the type of skills or value that you're going to bring to the table, it will be very difficult for you to take that conversation to the table, because we are going to sit at that table and say what. So for me, I think the first part is for us you need to identify what are your strengths. What is it that we need to build in ourselves as procurement or as supply chain professionals? The first things being, it's like your skills, because most of the time, even when in organization, when people are busy with their supply chain value addition, the one thing that we always do say we need to do a skills gap analysis. Like even here, if we have a team, when it comes to why do we start with skills gap analysis? It's because we know that supply chain management, there are certain skills that a person as a supply chain professional needs to have. That it's not just by on the job, in as much as some of the things can be on the job, then it's also skills that require you to actually have a formal education. Yeah. So for us, we will not be able to take that conversation to the top until we fix the bottom. For me, the bottom being for us to recognize what are the skills that you will need, because these are the skills that we're actually going to make a difference at that table when you're having that conversation, for you to say, but as supply chain professional, this is actually what I can bring to the table, and this is actually how I'm going to assist the company for us to position ourselves. But and until we fix that, I don't think that it's something the way we can say the top people must actually come down to us and say, oh, we value you. We need a lot of conversation if we ourselves have not actually identified those strengths that we need to add to the table.
Okay, I think perhaps just before we continue, our audience there, please do send your comments or questions on the chat box. And we'll also check if there are any questions as well on the other streams. So, but what I hear here, I know that we talk about top Phumzile, as you said, and Rosemary, maybe top, does it start from the top or should it start from the bottom? But as we touch on this important aspect about supply chain reporting as well, it's very important in terms of branding, or let's say positioning of supply chain. And rightfully so, Rosemary, you've said that, the interest of the CFO obviously are finances and not supply chain, but they look at finances as, numbers as well. But supply chain is more than numbers. If you look at what finance reports, they report about, in terms of the expenditure, management accounting reports, financial reports that they report monthly. You look at HR, they'll report on those metrics about HR. You look at, for example, operations, they'll report on those operations. But this now, it's at that C-suite level. If you look at this CFO's reporting, really, your supply chain is just not there as well. The metrics are not there. That is why I think for me, as Phumzile was saying, we will not see that value, delivered, or as we know that you are obviously acknowledged within an organization to the value that you bring to the organization. So in terms of our reports as well, what do we report as supply chain? Who is there to report on what we do? Not just on how many, tenders we've issued, or on that's not that. Because the issue then becomes, in terms of positioning within the organization, my question is, yes, if the C-suite doesn't see, or acknowledge your role or the value that you bring, as much as down there you have the skills, as you are saying, and what you need to deliver, it will just be recognized by the CFO, perhaps up to the CFO, up to your manager. It may not even get to the CFO, because for them, they just say, okay, this is the spend, which they don't see you in the value chain, what you have done. But supply chain is not just those cost savings. There are many things. Now we're talking the supply base, because without supply chain, the organization doesn't have a secure supply base, for example. So those are many facets of the supply chain. So, as much as I hear what you say, I think it is a combination. Yes, maybe from me as a professional, a supply chain professional, I can have those skills and to show my value. But also I think I can come and say, but, I need whoever that's there to actually assist me in this journey. So I think the profession itself, we really have a lot to do, including, I think, the CPOs that are there, because they're supposed to be assisting those that are junior in terms of this journey, because you killed off because you are like, you don't exist. But if anything goes wrong, you may even be called, Phumzile, to as high in the echelons in the organization as to the board, to the exco, to explain what went wrong. Even though it's not your fault as a supply chain professional, but as we know, anything that goes wrong, it would be yourself as a supply chain professional that has not done wrong. I'll give you an example where right now I'm consulting, one of the network service providers, for example, mobile service providers said, you know what, we're not providing a service. Guess who was called? The CPO. Yes. The CPO, yeah. It was the fault of the CPO. And what has the CPO has to do with the service provider not performing? When we went there, tried to call, because we actually needed to go there and find out what it was. They have not been paid. They have asked to be paid for a number of times. They've been talking to the IT department, and they had trade. We are not being paid. We put the contract together. We're managing performance. The performance is okay with the service provider. We are paid, but then they have not been paid. And now we are going to them and say, let's claw back from the contracts. And they're saying, why are you now, you are coming to us? Yes, we can actually assist in terms of identifying, value for this contract, but you can't be talking to us now. You are not paying us. That's like 6 months you've not been paying us. So I think that value for us, for supply chain, it also the leadership within supply chain. Maybe within you, the question that I may have in the space as well, I know you are in academia there, but even the curricula that we have, in terms of, yes, it needs to skill me as a professional, but is it skilling me enough to be actually able to go out there and have teeth, because we are seen to not have teeth out there as a professional? Because for you to brand and position, you really need, as we speak about the skill, you really need to have teeth. So I was just a bit diverting to the curricula of if you look at the curricula of supply chain, what do we have as well there for us to be record? Do we have logistics, and we say in supply chain. We have operations. It's also called supply chain. But in a supply chain, I think qualification, what is there? Are there any gaps that from your side, maybe you've seen that goes to actually affect this branding and positioning?
When it comes to the curriculum, I actually, you look at, I did a SIPS professional certification, and even my undergraduate, the supply chain course that I did. On top of my head, I can only recall there was introduction to supply chain management.
Yeah,
and that's it. There was transport economics, which I actually to date I actually don't understand where does it fit. And then there was, I think, logistics. Yeah, and that's basically it.
Yeah.
Now, going back to your question, the skills that we need, and one of the skills that is very key, and I don't know if Puntile will agree, as a procurement professional or as a supply chain professional, that you need is influencing. Because you will need to influence your stakeholder, and our curriculums are drafted in such a way that the practical skills that we need as supply chain management are not really the ones that are put in. Introduction to supply chain management, it's a broad course. It doesn't really cover it covers a lot of things, but it doesn't. It depending on from university to university or from college to college, they don't go down to the nitty-gritty things. Because what you have just said, Nasibo, you talk about the network service provider. You will need contract management. It's a very, very, very important skill when it comes to a supply chain professional. Because I remember now, you all can remember when this whole COVID thing started. The contracts of many organizations were in a mess. And most of the things, like the questions that we're asking when we are reading the supply chain magazine was, a company now allowed or liberty to pull the force manual clause? Because COVID, we just woke up one morning on the 20th of March, 2020, and the whole world is on lockdown. I have a contract for supply and delivery of my PPE. I know it's not a good example because when it comes to PPE, we were not really the most, it was the whole corruption scandal thing. How do we now make sure that the people that are supposed to supply and deliver our things based on our KPI that's in the contract still do and honor the agreement? But then now you have this something that happened that you have no control over. So how do you manage now this contract so that in the process you still retain the relationship that you had for 20 years with this supplier, and that in the process that you say, like, in as much as you need to be paid, I'm not really making the money because I actually need what you need to supply for me to make the money for you to pay you. So it's some of those skills that one would want it to be in the curriculums that are not there. Contract management, your influence, your stakeholder management. And now you have to go back to the various departments and say, guys, the textbook that was supposed to be delivered, the truck now, because of the borders are closed, what are we going to do? So for me, that is how it's going in terms of the position that you are having as a supply chain profession in an institution. How do you now leverage your position in the institution for you to be able to have this conversation with this stakeholder and show the value that you are adding? So to answer your question, the curriculums are not really having the skills, or not the skills, the courses that need to empower the professional with the skills that they actually need to run the everyday operations in the organization, and for them to show that value. Because if you don't have influencing skills, it will be very difficult for you to show the CFO, or for you, even if you to show them how is it actually, what value are you bringing to the table, because you are unable to, because you you basically only had like transport economics, which is not really what you need now at this moment.
Yeah, I actually
maybe
agree.
Phumzile, before you go on, as you answer, as you chip in here, if you can also answer Ulindi is asking Uguti, she hears that we're talking about skills. But then can we elaborate on that?
Right. So influence, I completely agree, Rose, that when we are going into cross-functional teams on any procurement activity, the voice of supply chain management is becomes critical. So depending on the level of influence or the type of influence that you can you amass, the value comes through or it doesn't come through in that procurement activity. And so you are spot on in that regard. So when we are then talking about influence, how do we then as supply chain management build or develop ourselves to become more influential? And going back to what Sibongile's point is that it's important that there's that hybrid, that the top down, there is a need for advocacy of a supply chain at the very high levels, at board levels, at CEO levels, at the C-suite. The supply chain's voice is quite muted at those levels until there's a scandal. Until there's an irregular supply chain is everywhere, which is very interesting. So we need advocacy at that level, which is very consistent, which is very strong. But now, as a supply chain professionals, as you have rightfully put, there is a responsibility on us because we know our history. We know where supply chain comes from. Let's just know. Let's just talk about it. In procurement, or what used to be called in those days purchasing, was a space where non-performers were thrown at. Was a space where, when we don't know, we can't fire them. We're gonna face a legal battle. Take them.
We throw them there.
You know what I mean? There's an administrator that they don't know what to do. They've restructured. Throw them into purchasing. So we've got those legacy issues that we are also dealing with. Compounded with that, people, we are saying, okay, guys, go to school, improve yourselves. You have also touched on it. The curriculum is not adequate enough to bring those people to the level that organizations can extract value from them. Right? So we have gaps in the academic space as well that we need to now start looking in the academic space to say, where are those gaps? Because the people go through academic universities or colleges, and they come out with a diploma or a degree, and they are not work ready. We've seen this, we've conducted the research. Us as leadership, we have realized that these guys are not work ready. So there's that gap that we now need to do close as leadership in supply chain spaces to get them to a level where they can do a semblance of value add, right? So we have that as a problem. So Ulindi has asked then, Uguti, what are these skills that we are talking about? So there's some research that I conducted a few weeks ago, where we know we are moving over now, and we are now starting to think about what are the requirements in the 21st century, and it's important that supply chain moves with what are the requirements, because we are always lagging behind. Right? We are always lagging behind because we don't move ourselves as rapidly as the economic demands or the market demands require of us. And I was talking to another friend that is running an employment agency to say there's an importance now even for employment agencies to start focusing on supply chain management, because the briefs that they get, even from institutions, to say we want a buyer, we want a category manager, we want a commodity specialist, even the brief that comes, it attracts poor skilled professionals. You understand? So even the briefs that are coming from organizations are not aligned to what the organizations are looking for in terms of what are the strategic requirements. They are not keeping up with the market demands. So and COVID has really shown us, because COVID has found us flat-footed as supply chain management. When it hit us, we couldn't move as quickly as we needed to move. We couldn't respond to the market as quickly. We were not agile. We couldn't think outside the box. Our technology was not robust and strong enough to take us through swiftly to get those procurements done quickly and effectively and cost effectively for us. So some of those I think there's top 5 or so skills that are always spoken about as in most professions are trying to hone into those top 5 21st century skills. Supply chain is not paying attention to that once again. One of them is communication. We are unable to communicate effectively as supply chain professionals. That's why our voices in those cross-functional teams around the tables are not felt.
Not heard, Are
not heard, because we have actually very poor communication skills. We need to strengthen our communication skills. We need to go back and find spaces where as supply chain and seek those spaces where we can develop our communication skills, written and verbal. Have you seen, and when you said to those committees, have you seen some of the guys when they come into the adjudication committees and they want to present, and they can't even convince the committee of the process followed, why we need to buy, why we can't buy, what are the risks, what are the rewards, etc. It's difficult. Sometimes, then the adjudication committee will try to read the document. It is so put together in such shambolic ways that even when the audit comes, it creates even additional problems. So the communication skills are very important if we are saying we want to position ourselves and brand ourselves as the 21st century profession. I spoke about technology. Supply chain management, we were shocked when we did some research with consulting with a department. Guys are still writing on paper. like people are still using, what do they call it? A purchase order book.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
I thought we are into ERP systems now.
I'm telling you, we were thinking people are still using a purchase order book. They still, you know what I'm saying? Technology is there, and almost I'm still yet to come across an organization that doesn't have an ERP system, whether it's SAP, whether it's Oracle, whether it is Pastel or whatever it is. Organizations have invested in these systems, but they are not adequately utilized by our supply chain management professionals. We're not using technology because technology is going to help us to be quicker, to be swift, to be agile. We're not using technology. In certain instances, organizations are paying for modules that are related to supply chain management, but we're not using them. Some organizations found that they are paying for them. They didn't even realize they are paying for supply chain management modules that they don't use. Wasted expenditure. So we need to hone in and start using technology. Of course, knowledge management, we've talked about knowledge, but this knowledge is not only academically inclined type of knowledge. Yes, academic is very important, but as supply chain management, it's important for us to go into different webinars. There's a lot of free knowledge and curriculums on the net that we can go into, that we can just take time out and say, my manager, speak to your manager to say this month I would like to take out 3 to maybe 5 hours of this month to go through a certain webinar, do some work there on my own in the office, etc., etc. This I want to learn about contracts management, for example. I want to understand what are the best-in-class standards that are out there. And I want to bring that into our organization and improve on contracts management. So we need to take it upon ourselves as professionals to say, because I know training and development plan, supply chain management is also very flawed. A lot of organizations, when you say, can I look at your procurement and supply chain training strategy? There is none. People talk about, okay, take them for Excel training, take them for MS Word training or silly things like that. So there is no deliberate focus on training, on developing a training plan or a training strategy for supply chain professionals. It is a very, very important one. And as supply chain professionals, we need to take it upon ourselves to go to our managers and say, as an organization, I feel we have a gap at 1 to 3 levels, and I want to train myself. I want to go for communication training. I want to join Toastmasters in my area, for example, because I want to gain confidence in talking and presenting. Do you understand? So that is another skill that leads into another skill that is also taken for granted, and we need to be able to lead ourselves. Let's not wait to be told, do this, don't do that, and do this and don't do that. When you lead yourself, you take initiative, you create, you innovate, you influence. Those are skills that are considered 21st century skills. We need to be able to self-lead as supply chain professionals. So those are the top, I think I talked about 3, 4, so 5.
4.
Yes, which I say, as supply chain professionals, if we take anything away from this webinar today, it's those. Go back to the organization to say, I want to go and learn e-communication skills. I want to use our technology more. Can we go into technology here to improve on instead of using e-process of getting a purchase request via a written paper? Can you ask our end user now and develop a process that the end user puts their purchase request on SAP, because those are standard modules that come with SAP or Oracle. They must put it on SAP, log it on SAP, and then they let it come to supply chain. And then we are already creating an audit trail, which is going to effectively impact on our audit processes and our audit costs at the end. We don't need to run around looking for where's the file, where's the PR, because it's on the system already. Take that initiative. Self-lead is the third one. Take that initiative. Drive what is it that you need to achieve as a supply chain professional. It contribute to what is it as a function we can do better.
Definitely,
And come up with those innovative ways. Here is what I think we can do better. Let's try this. Let's check the problems, become a problem solver in the organization. That's why we are known as those are just tenderers, those are just administrators, because we seldom come up with innovative ideas and we don't demonstrate our critical thinking or problem solving capabilities, which we have. And let's come up of out of our shells, and let's start raising our own voice. As much as we are saying, CFO, CEO, board, you need to become our advocate. We also need to do the same at our level. I hope that answers Lindy's question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And just to build on that, the other one that before I just move into positioning, because I think it's what you have built on. Because the one thing that I think Sibongile spoke about now, when it comes to us now positioning, one of the skills also that you really need as a supply chain, it's also, besides now your lead, you also have to have this risk management. I think, and it's one of the skills that we really, really overlook, and something that we really don't build. Because even if you look at most company risk register, we have a lot of anything else but any risk pertaining to supply chain that is on that risk register. But then when the problem comes now, but then we are like, but this risk was never flogged like all this time. Now all of a sudden now there's a problem now. It needs to be solved. It's now a big risk. It's causing a scandal, but then we never. So I think it's one of the other skills that as a supply chain professional that we really need to invest in is risk management, where we have to build all these metrics, they have all these tools and equipment in place for us to, in as much as to mitigate risk in our supply chain before they actually blow up in our face.
Yeah.
So if I can, in terms of, I think the other one that Sipogile spoke about was positioning, because we say it's very difficult for us supply chain to actually, but where are we in the organization? You know.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always say is like always say we are so scared of, because we're not so confident in ourselves, if I can put it that way, for lack of a better word, that we don't really, we rather we are just there, we are in finance, we are just put there. So, but for us, in order to us actually position ourselves as this value-adding department within an organization, we need to gauge our peers and actually ask, what are the perception or your company or your other departments perception have on supply chain? What do they think of supply chain? And we can do that through having things like a survey. You know, do you guys actually even know we exist, or do you just know us? Because we're in finance, so people just say it's the finance department. That there's actually a supply chain division within that finance. Most of the departments, they don't know until they have this 1 million tender or something that they need to do. Then they run to you. So do our colleagues, do they really understand what is supply chain management? Those are some of the questions that we really need to ask if we want to position ourselves so that we can actually gauge and see, but do our colleagues actually in the organization actually know or even understand what is supply chain management? Do they actually understand even the value that we can add if we are really engaged from the beginning and not when the bomb went off, now all of a sudden they need us? So for me, I always say it's something that is very difficult, but something that we can do. If we can have those 360, a survey just to send out to the organization and say, do you guys know what is supply chain management? We are this division. Do you guys actually know what we do? Do you think we add value? Because from the answers that you are going to get, you're actually going to build a strategy for yourself that, you know what, maybe of the 100% of the organization, only 60 knows don't know about us. Now, how do we go about now to ensure that this 60% actually come on board also to the phone to actually understand the value that we add? And also just for us to understand at what level in the organization, most of the time, supply chain management in organization, we only operate at tactical and operational level. We don't, when it comes to strategic level, we are nowhere. Like Ponsile said, there's nobody there in the C-suite who's actually putting the voice of supply chain in that office to say, this is actually the value that this is actually how our strategy when it comes to supply chain can tie into the whole organization strategy and so forth. So we need to have that those conversations on how do we get ourselves at that table. So and even also just to ask when if you guys hear supply chain management, what do you think we do? Because some people like to say they just think we're just there for tender. We need to purchase order. We need what? That's all. So if we don't have those questions or questionnaires or survey for us also just to understand, so that from that experience or from those answers, from those feedback, you'll be able to actually position ourselves in a way that we can actually use, because we can have all these skills, and all that, but how do we now ensure that we put these skills to good use to add value to the organization?
Completely.
Yeah, so it's I think you raise important points here as well, because as you and Pumzura are talking, and you're talking about these skills and these 21st century skills that we're talking about, the leadership, leading yourself, innovating, self-innovate. But then a question comes to my mind that if I've just come out of college, maybe not even come out, but I've been in this space, I have the qualification, maybe I have 3 years experience, then as you say, the first thing that happens is let's do a skills gap analysis. And I'm fine to be not proficient, but I have gone to study for this qualification. But then it comes out that I don't have the skills. So it's very, I think for a supply chain professional, that's very disheartening, because then if, for example, a tool like a skills gap analysis, even if it's a SIPS for what I have studied for, and it comes out that am not proficient. So what does that mean? And also, I think it's very overwhelming when you have studied, like you're saying, it's transport economics, but it's a supply chain. It didn't even say to you, okay, if you go in transport, you specialize, these are the things that you do become. Maybe it's a supply chain degree or diploma, but then you specialize, just at supply chain. And these are the issues that perhaps, yes, as we're saying, it's up to us. We need to look at, because obviously, I can never have that confidence, as you're saying, to go and sit there. Because as we know, the leadership part that Phumzile talks about for the 21st century skill, you are a leader by the mere virtue that you are a supply chain professional. Whether you are a buyer, so you are thrust into leadership. Because if you say go and spend a capex, whatever, of even if it's 5 million, that's a lot of money. You need to lead this project. It's a project in itself. But if I can ask you, in your qualification, was the project management there? Nothing like that. Those communication skills, nothing like that. Analytical skills, nothing like that. Because you are thrust. You put, I think, in an area where you are actual. I think as much as we believe that finance is responsible for the fund, but you are put there as a supply chain professional to expand, the funds of the organization, because you are the one who goes out there and look at the market. You are out there who are going to, assist. You sit there while they spec. You look at that. You are, and that risk that you're talking about, risk management. You need to look at the market, whether we can secure this supply base. You are not taught about all these things, the risk within supply chain management, the finances within supply chain management, all these other areas, the dynamics, because this is a dynamic function. As much as we are not, because you actually are involved from the beginning. It's not just from there when the demand is identified, you need to be there. This is where the value is. You actually contribute. You deliver value at each and every step, but then you are not prepared for this. For example, right now in this other project, people are resigning. At the Western Cape in the because they are not actually this. There are so many projects that they have to do, and they are saying here is a supply. They are not giving them skilled people. Because the other thing that my view is, Phumzile and Rosemary, is why we do not have a right position and a branding and a perception is that who is in supply chain management? Who is there? Because if we're talking skills, as Lindy said, who is there? Are the people that are put their skills? No. Anybody, because we buy at home, which is it's rightly so, you know how to buy. But do you know how to buy for an organization? That's something different. Because if I go and buy groceries, I just want this one coffee, and I just want this one couch, and I just want this. So it's just as simple as that. But that is why there are these issues, which I think maybe perhaps as leadership, academia within the supply chains, because I think we have a lot of traction. We have a lot of academics now, and authors and lecturers and professors. So we need this critical mass to start even there. With the curricula, this is what is required, even within organizations. Take a stance. I think Phumzile, no, I'm not going to have this. I was helping out with interviews the other day. It's painful to see what we are speaking, to your point, Phumzile, what we are putting out there and recruiting people. And I don't know, even within HR as well, when you shortlist, why would you shortlist somebody that does not qualify? because they believe that, no, this one, because they have a BCom, they have an engineering, and they've had a stunt. Perhaps they're saying, I've been in procurement. What have they been there? Can they do what I've put out there, the spec? So these are the skills that we really need to look at. Who do we put there? Because we can never, for me, I'm saying we can never change this perception if we don't look at the competencies, the capabilities that are there. Because they are the ones, remember, as you're saying, it's what people look at, the brand is, even when you are not there, it speaks for yourself. But in this instance, we have anybody and everybody within this space. So how do we protect our space? Because you cannot go into finance. You cannot be a CAO. You cannot be a senior manager in finance. Or we can start even by saying, a finance specialist, without you having those qualifications and also registering, for example, in that aspect. You cannot do that. But with us, we allow that. Yeah. And we crumble under pressure. Yes, under pressure in the organization. If your boss says this, no, it's fine, you will take that. So we don't even protect, as leaders, the people that are below us. And then how do we expect them to rise to self-lead, because we don't protect them? I think also we have a duty as leadership within supply chain. I think that's my view on that aspect, because it's really disheartening if you hear when you do the research and hear what the people that are out there trying to actually do the right things, but they are so disheartened. Yeah. I know we have the time, so I'll leave it to you and Phumzile.
Yeah, just maybe to conclude, since you are right in saying Sibongile, because the problem is why I cannot wake up tomorrow and say I want to be a chartered accountant. It's because when it comes to chartered accountancy, the profession has been professionalized. I don't know if that makes if there's anything in English word like that, if I can say that, because it's like for you to become a chartered accountant, or even for you to become a civil engineer, it's fine, you do your undergraduate, you do what. But for you to register with the Engineering Council of South Africa, for example, just don't wake up tomorrow and say, no, I'm ready to be a civil engineer. Please put me on the list. You understand? So those professionals have done the base work. The base work being, they have looked at how are we going to maintain certain work ethics, certain professionalism in our profession. How do we go about it? We're going to go about it through now to say, if you want to become a chartered accountant, this is what you need to do in order for you to come there. It's fine, you do your undergraduate, you do your articles, but still, before you can actually put on the initial behind your name of a CA, South Africa, or Namibia, whatever, you need to sit for these exams. Because you do find, I can go to school, do my BCom in accounting and what, but then I'll just be a normal accountant and I'll just end there. But for you to be a CFO, they will know that, no, they actually need the requirement, no, we need a CFO, at least chartered accountancy. So for you to have that chartered accountancy, they will know that you need to have actually gone through the professional exams, and this is what you write, this is what you do, what you do. And in other instances, like, for procurement, there is the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. It's there, we go through the exams, we do everything. But at the end of the day, for me, I think it's the whole supply chain professional that needs to be professionalized. Because if you look at the country, and I think a good example that we can use on an African continent is Kenya, where they have, I think it's called the Kenya Institute of Supply Chain Management, where, if I'm not mistaken, speaking under correction, when it comes to supply chain management in Kenya, there's a route that you take for you to be recognized as a supply chain professional in Kenya. You need to register with KISEM. You need to, at least they accept to say if you have gone through SIPs, if you have gone through what, and then you take exams and you get registered on a register for you, then they will know that this is the profession that they are protecting. And then they are backed up by, they have act, their government has actually put an act in place to protect the profession, because in as much as to say that supply chain is not just any profession, it's actually the backbone of many governments, if not at least 80 to 90% of most GDPs accounted for. It's through supply chain. So it cannot just be a free for all. Anybody, like Pumsile said earlier on, we want to discipline this person, we don't want them here anymore. Where are we going to place them? Let's place them in supply chain, let them sit there. But then the person does not even have any alliance or anything to the profession. So I think, just to conclude, it needs to start the language that we need to start speaking as supply chain professional is to come up with ways to make sure that in as much as certain countries have those, but how holistically can we do it so that we ensure we protect the profession through professionalization, and that the only way is to make entry into, entry into the profession. I don't want to say as difficult as possible, but make it into such a way as to how do we get the people to actually take the profession serious if we don't professionalize it ourselves.
Okay. There's a question here from Lindy, who says, do you also involve the government department? Because we are struggling when we source in quotations, so we should ask for 3 and suppliers don't respond. Why can't we just ask 1 quotation because they are already in the database? Pumzile, can you maybe address this in your closing comments, or even Rosemary? I think he's asking from a government point of view as well.
Lindy, is she still on?
She's still here.
Hi, Lindy.
I'm struggling to understand the question.
Yes, that's what I would like for her to just elaborate a little bit.
Lindy, you can unmute yourself and speak to.
Hello.
Hi, Lindy. How are you?
Hello. Hi, Tanzania.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Background. We can hear you, but do you want to close your your volume somewhere? I don't know.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, I need to know, which do you also engage government departments now? And then, like in government departments, you are still sourcing 3 quotations, and they will struggle because the suppliers don't want to respond because they say that they don't want us to give them business. And then I don't understand.
Lindy, your network. Lindy, your network is. You have bad connectivity.
So maybe you can give me clarity on that.
Lindy, can you hear us?
I'm not sure how you work. How
I don't think she even hears us.
Hello.
Lindy. We are battling to hear you. Connectivity is not right.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, we are battling to hear you. I think there's a problem with your connectivity. Maybe turn around or something. Lindy, are you still there? Lindy?
Okay, while you're trying to get to Lindy, as we also going to be wrapping up, I just need to get my battery charger quickly. Please give me two minutes, but you guys can continue because my laptop is going to die.
That's fine. I think my understanding of Lindy's question or issue here is that they have a system of sourcing here in their department, which means probably it's a quotation system. They have to approach 3 suppliers to get quotations before they can appoint. So it's a question I think here is saying that why do they, because then suppliers don't respond because they are in their database. So she's saying, why can't they just get 1 quotation because the suppliers are already in their database. But I think Lindy is back, so she can formalize and I don't know if she had the gist of what I've said. So that was my understanding of her question.
Yeah, it sounds like she's asking a policy issue, which is a data level issue. It's a policy issue.
Yeah, in procedure. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Right. So it's a little bit tricky to just tackle it now as it is. But the standard procedure or the standard process, as Lindy would know, which they are, when we are, drawing it from Section 217, we are always looking for competitiveness, fairness, transparency, equity, etc. And those 5 pillars are looked at in terms of, did you invite as many people as you can, so that they compete? There's fairness, which they've compete adequately. Whoever you have chosen, it's the best price, etc. So yes, those are one of the requirements of how we procure. However, there's another lever that is given where you can go for a direct procurement without you going through a tender process or open tender or closed tender or closed process where you are always asking for 3 or 5 quotes. You can also do that, Lindy. Nothing precludes you from doing that. But you have to be able to demonstrate that there's still that fairness. You just didn't go to this one particular supplier simply because you want to use them. You can say, I've gone out the past 2-3 times, but there was no proper response, from the market. And me going out on these open processes is actually a waste of money and it's a waste of time, which leads to inefficiencies. Or there might be instances where it's such a specialized requirement. We all know it's a very, very lean market for this particular service. It might be a highly technical skill. And we all know that if we just open it, there will be no one. There's maybe just 1 or 2 players we all know in this country play in this particular space. So that is also another motivation one can use, which I don't want to go into, go out on these 3 processes. We want to go for what we call it direct procurement. And there's nothing illegal about that. But you just need to be able to demonstrate all the time that there is no abuse of the system. Because we all know, PPE, we find ourselves where we are because there was that abuse. There was a lot of direct procurement. People were just going,
they abused that clause,
price comparison and making sure this is the fair price. And they didn't do proper evaluations that you actually are in the space of your health and safety. They were buying mask and PPE from someone who's working from their back room or from things like that. So you need to do proper due diligence and demonstrate to the leadership that I might have gone through a direct procurement process, meaning I've gone directly. I didn't go out to invite multiple suppliers. These are the reasons. I have done that risk analysis we've spoken about earlier, Rose. I have done the risk analysis. Here are the risks that I thought they might come out. This is how I have, this is how I have mitigated them or engaged or addressed them. And I think I've done the market research, even though I've gone to this one supplier to get this particular thing. But when I've done the market research, it is still a fair price that I could have gotten into. So there are ways you can do this. The basic thing that you always need to look out to is to make sure those 5 pillars with Section 217, use those as your guiding light. Even though I've gone for a direct procurement process, can I still demonstrate that there's risk management that has been done? It's still a fair price. If I've done enough evaluation, due diligence, etc., to look for all those risks that might come in and prejudice the company or raise an irregularity for the company or even impact on the bottom line of the company. Interesting enough, I was listening this morning on 702 Minister Mthethwa when they were talking about this 20 million plus projection on building this infrastructure of our, apparently this flag. They want to put
The
an
national
infrastructure
flag.
of a flag and hoist it, and it's gonna cost us 21 million going north. And so they were asking them, of all these questions, have you done the due diligence? What informs this 21 million?
Yeah.
How are we
That's what I wanted to ask. How did you know it's going to
what
cost 21
informs
million?
this
It's not
21
even done.
million? Does it even make sense for us to put up the flag at this point? And those are the same questions that you need to ask yourself, Lindy, Huti. Does it even make sense for us to buy? I know we're always fighting with our IT guys, right? They'll always say we want a laptop, and they're always looking for the top of the range spec. And then you ask, okay, you want a laptop, you want a functional laptop. What is it that you want to do with this laptop? They will tell you it's for my IT administrator, and you're like, but your administrator doesn't need top of the range spec for them to do the work, for example, fit for purpose. But when you are having those types of conversations with your end user, you need to also have done your homework. You need to also come and demonstrate what you are actually, you're coming with an informed. You're basing this type of conversation or engagement. You're just not pushing back, but you have done your due diligence. You have done your market research, for example. I remember there was one point where we were asked, I was buying vehicles, and they wanted a 4x4, top of the range, this, and then you're asking, okay, so what are we going to be using these vehicles for? And we are told, no, they will be traveling from point A to point B, 500 meters across. I don't want to, go deep, because then I'm going to reveal the company. In an average month, they'll be probably, these cars will be doing less than 100K in a month, for example. Okay, so how does the terrain look like? No, it's a flat terrain. They are usually on tar, etc. So why do we need a 4x4? If it's a flat terrain,
it's not their money.
But you then need to have those types of conversations as you are then saying, this is the procurement direction that we're going to go. It's going to be a closed one. It's going to be an open one. Why are we closing it? Why are we opening it? Why are we doing 3 quotes instead of an open, fully fledged tender? But we need to be able to demonstrate that we do our due diligence first as supply chain professionals. We get to understand the market. And so we have those, we not only have compliance discussions with our users, as much as compliance is important, but we do then start having strategic conversations with our end users. That's how we start positioning ourselves. That's how we improve our brand.
I think Lindy as well. Lindy, just to answer you as well, why don't you go to one? You can actually do that because you already have them in your database as well. Or you may have, for example, a list of service providers for a particular service. And then you have prices upfront that they cannot go above this, or you have just one price. Then you rotate. For example, the one you can rotate them as and when. For example, the one that comes, you can have a plan, for example, a strategy that, okay, in a year, you would give to each service provider equally, and then you rotate it accordingly. You don't have to go now to ask for the 3 quotations. You just go to one, then the next request that comes, you go to the next, because you've already pre-qualified these service providers. You've issued that RF, whatever that says, if you want to provide services, whatever, you've checked them, you've done your due diligence on them. Then, as you now have them in your database, you just rotate. You don't do 3 quotes, because what we find, as Pumzile says, you will do for a simple 100,000, you go to 3 service providers. The time that you've taken to actually, conclude this service, it's more than 100,000. So it's not actually, productive. So these are the things that you do, and this is what we called innovation or something like that. So you do, even for quotations, you can actually do that. And we also have what you call it e-procurement, where you don't even have to. There are other, ERP can also assist us in terms of this. And yes, people won't respond because service providers become despondent. You always issue, but you don't award to them. You will always award to one service provider, for example. So people don't. You end up without suppliers. To your question here, to say you don't have suppliers don't respond because they're tired. So maybe in wrapping up.
Yes, please. Let's not keep Rosemary for too long. I think we've
Rosemary, maybe
procurement discussions will never be.
They will never end. Yeah, they never do.
Never. I see here there's a comment from Ukoni. She's saying we need session 2 for BE procurement. Private sector is still not doing enough to comply. Yep.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, we don't really have the whole BE thing.
There's a whole BE talk, and I mean, there's now a talk which people are really looking for it to be scrapped altogether. I think I wrote a little bit of a blog along those lines. Posted a blog. Is it last week or 2 weeks ago?
Last week.
We need to have different conversations about the BE. But I agree with you, Connie, that we are
having a session in July with regards to this one. Supply chain and transformation, socio-economic development, which includes BE. We are having a session.
It might be interesting.
Yeah,
because for us, we still don't have. I see South Africa. You have quite a lot when it comes to triple BE. You have your. We don't have a legislation. There is one that needs to go through Parliament, but like she said, the private sectors and people are pushing it. So for now, I think it's just a few constitutional fundamentals that are there. Other than that, we really don't have that.
Yeah, and I've seen you are taking a lot from the South African triple BE one.
That's what they are trying.
Yeah. I think in general, just a closing, the South African. As a South African market in jail, in the environment, we've got good policies. We have, that are promulgated, put out. Our biggest issue now is just to make sure they are implemented effectively. We are completely failing in that regard. We've got really strong and robust policies and regulations. So we need to start working on really making them work. Those pieces of legal instruments. How do we effectively leverage them to deliver the intended objective? So from my side, I think that's that. Thank you so much. I will close on that note. I'll hand it back over to you, Sibongile and Rose.
Thank you, Phumzile. Quite an interesting session. We know we can go on and on about it, but I hope that from this we can get some takeaways in terms of how do we brand, the key issues how we brand. Obviously, we've had those skills, the 21st century skills, which involves your leadership, self-leadership, also self-innovating. And we've heard from yourself as well in terms of the legacy, the brand, Rosemary, in terms of how do you brand yourself in terms of, but the key one that came out is actually the value that you bring to the organization. So I think value is most important. Maybe as I close out from you, Rosemary.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. It was actually, I was a bit nervous, but I actually liked it. I think I've only listened to one of your previous, I haven't really, I think maybe because of the time I haven't really, but it's a very interesting platform. And these are the kind of platforms that we actually need to put the voice of the profession out there to continuously be, not in people's face per se, but just to put out there. This is actually the type of conversations that we are also having as a profession. Yeah. So in my from as a closing of remarks, it's just that we must stay curious. We must stay developing ourselves, and we must also just stay asking the right questions and making sure that we are actually in rooms where our voice is actually needed and where we need to stay relevant. Yeah. So that's actually my closing remarks. Yeah.
No, thank you very much. I see you still repeat, we will stick to consistency for us to be taken seriously as well.
Yes.
That's consistency and value. So thank you so much. Thank you to Maji, our technofundi that's there driving this for us and making it our, successful and to reach the, broader base than here. So thank you very much to our participants as well, to the comments. This will be updated, will be posted as well after the session if you have missed anything else. And yeah, join us next week as we speak about professionalization of supply chain, but as we get lessons from KISM, as you were saying, Rosemary will be speaking to...
Oh, okay, that will be interesting. I really have to...
Yes, we'll be speaking to the chairperson of KISM, sharing some lessons of how they did it. So see you next week.
I think I'll need to make... Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Rosemary. Bye. Thanks to the audience. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Bye, Connie.
Bye, Connie. See you soon.